Hello and welcome. This presentation was designed specifically for international students at Heller. Within this presentation, you will be introduced to or reminded of general information, insight, strategies, and resources as it relates to navigating the U.S. job search. Here's a look at the agenda. I first want to start off by having a conversation about the differences between Brandeis ISO and the Heller Career Development Center, but having a conversation about how these offices, while different, can assist you. We'll then move into a conversation about what a comprehensive search looks like, followed by top 5 OPT questions and answers. So I'll list those questions and provide some insight and guidance to those questions. We'll then move into the OPT timeline and specifications. This is information that comes directly from ISSO, but is included here as a friendly reminder. Then we will move into sponsorship questions. These are questions that you might have, and these may be questions that you encounter during the application or interview process. And following up, I will leave you with a number of strategies to increase your chances of success, and of course, list out several resources. So here are 2 offices that are designed to assist you, the Brandeis ISSO and the Heller Career Development Center. While separate offices, you may think that there is some overlap, but they are very distinct in the type of assistance they can offer you. The Brandeis ISSO, they are immigration advisors and legal guides. If you have questions about visa eligibility, documentation, benefits, procedures, these types of questions, by all means, you want to check with the immigration advisors and immigration experts to that end. I like to think about OPT in this way. USCIS essentially manages and administers the OPT program. ISSO serves as your liaison. So they liaise between you and USCIS. They are experts in applications, forms, timelines, specifications, qualifications. So if you have questions about, can I have 2 employers? Can I work this many hours? Does this type of work count? Again, it is USCIS that administers the OPT program, but ISSO, they are the experts who know the answers to these questions, and where they don't, they can simply connect with USCIS. The Heller Career Development Center, we are career specialists, and we are experts in career development and preparation. And what this means is we can certainly assist you with your resume, your cover letter, if you want to negotiate salary or learn tips on how to negotiate salary. Maybe you want to have a conversation about your general search strategies, your networking strategy, your communication strategy, your marketing strategy. These are all things that we can assist you with. Maybe you have general questions. Maybe your questions are related to, uncertainty in how to answer questions as it relates to interviews, and you want to connect with us to prepare for an interview. Again, all of these are ways in which we can assist you, and we continue to assist you. I'll talk later in this presentation more specifically about how we can assist you through various programs. Moving into a comprehensive search, there are a number of pieces to consider. Oftentimes I find that students hyper-focus on the online search and application process. And while I'm not here to criticize that, there are many more pieces to the search that need to be addressed. So first of all, you can see there in big bright red, please start your search early. Your search actually began yesterday. So regardless of whether you joined us in the fall or you joined us in the spring, you are in the search right now. You actually were in the search before you joined Heller. So how is that possible, right? How can I possibly be in the search? I'm not online looking for jobs just yet. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is a lot of preparation that goes into this. Career development is exactly that. It's developmental. It takes place over time. Getting your documents together doesn't happen overnight. Developing an extensive network, connections, that doesn't happen overnight. Developing self-awareness, career awareness, these pieces don't happen overnight. So folks, it's really important that you begin this process as early as possible. You will do yourself a favor and set yourself up for greater success when you start early, as opposed to sort of waiting until the final month or the final months of your time at Heller and starting the process at that point. So taking a closer look at what this exactly means, First of all, you need a customized resume. Second of all, you need to tailor every cover letter. Number two, tailoring every cover letter simply means using the position description as a guide. Whatever is in the position description are the pieces that you should be addressing in your cover letter. Together, your resume and cover letter are designed to generate interest. When they are done well and you are successful, you're going to be invited to interviews. Number three, networking is absolutely essential. And what networking is making meaningful connections. So making meaningful connections is really about developing relationships with folks before you start asking them for things. So we all know what your end goal is here, whether that is to ask someone if they have an opportunity available, or if they're open to creating an opportunity, or if they can connect you to someone else. But in the United States, networking is a really delicate song and dance. Again, we all know what your end goal is. It's a matter of your communication style and how you go about networking that can make you really successful or maybe not so successful. So how can you network? Of course, you can attend our lunch and learns, our information sessions, our treks, our fairs, events, our panels. All of these sessions are designed to put you in front of alumni and employers alike for the purpose of networking and opportunity generating. You can also volunteer, complete internships, participate in networking events, join professional organizations, attend socials, hobbies, and conduct informational interviews. So a lot of these things are happening over Zoom right now. They're no longer happening in person, at least for the short term. But instances like workshops or conferences, organizers are building in time to facilitate networking because that is really core to what these opportunities provide you. And following that, it's really important again. So not all jobs are made available, yet you spend the bulk of your time in the online search. Again, this is where getting to know others can be of assistance to you. So in your networking, someone may have you in mind for an opportunity that isn't otherwise posted and made available to the general public. This happens often, and it's called the hidden job market. By networking, you can put yourself in a position to secure an opportunity that others aren't aware of, right? It's about pursuing opportunities, learning about opportunities, and creating opportunities that don't otherwise exist. Number four is getting noticed. This is really thinking about your strategy of differentiation. Everyone in your cohort is graduating presumably at or about the same time with the same degree, and you've all completed the same courses. So how are you going to market yourself? How are you going to separate yourself in a distinct and compelling way that will get you noticed by employers? Number five, of course, the online job search. You should absolutely be doing that. But more than the online job search, it's really making sure and sort of engaging in a pre-assessment that you are the right fit for a particular job and you fit into an organization's larger mission, if you will. Number six is, of course, preparing for your interviews. Highly recommend preparing for an interview versus just jumping in and winging it. And of course, something that I find students don't know is that in the United States, there is this expectation that you send a thank you email or note to everyone who took time to interview you within 24 hours after your interview. So definitely be sure to send thank yous. Number seven, follow up. Follow up is key. And this is the only area where you have control in sort of the application and interview process. So if an employer says that you should hear from them within 2 weeks after an interview and you don't, by all means, follow up in accordance with that established timeline. So at 2 weeks, follow up with them. You might follow up a second or a third time, but beyond 3 times, that becomes excessive at that point. It might be time to move on and continue with your search, but definitely follow up. That's where you have control. And finally, number 8 is building resilience. This is your physical and mental capacity to move forward despite obstacles. The search can be a grueling process. You're going to be told no. You might be recruited by a recruiter, you interview, and then suddenly they ghost you. You no longer hear from them again, but you follow up and you still don't hear from them. You may make it to round 2 or 3 of an interview process and then don't hear anything back. So you must build resilience, again, that physical and mental capacity to move forward despite obstacles and challenges, because those are part of this process. Let's review the top 5 OPT questions and answers. So number 1, who hires OPT students? Great question. Number 2, does the Career Center have a list of OPT job titles? Number 3, does the Career Center have a list of OPT sponsors? Number 4, what does the Career Center hear from employers? And number 5, how can the Career Center help you? So who hires OPT students? The good news is that all employers currently maintain legal authority to hire OPT students, which is really great news. But when we think about it, remember your OPT must be related to your academic program. And then suddenly we go from all employers to sort of a very narrow filter at this point. So let's take a closer look at what that means. Oftentimes, employers use a cost-benefit analysis to determine the implications of hiring, recruiting, and training a student for 1 year of service. And employers oftentimes aren't convinced that this 1-year term will benefit them. What this means is they're not convinced that the associated costs will exceed the benefits, and therefore many employers simply choose not to hire international students. However, employers may find more value in hiring STEM designated students who have up to 3 years of OPT eligibility. And at this point, this is a theory. Only recently did Heller have a STEM designated program, and there's simply not enough data to draw any conclusions at this point. But our thinking is that employers may be more compelled to potentially hire a student with 3 years of OPT eligibility versus just 1 year of OPT eligibility. That remains to be seen. Now, employers overwhelmingly hire students from the STEM industries. This isn't any surprise. So science, technology, engineering, math, finance, and the medical industries. Some organizations and employers simply misunderstand or they lack knowledge of what OPT is. And this is an opportunity for you to communicate to an employer that you really value, that you feel compelled to work at, what OPT is and how you can be of value to them, especially through the OPT program. Now, I want to caution that an organization may hire someone this year, but not next year. So just because an organization has a history of hiring or sponsoring doesn't mean that that will be true going forward. Just the opposite is true as well. So just because an organization hasn't hired or sponsored in the past doesn't mean that they won't in the future. Again, maybe you are the exception. Maybe you are the one who educates them on the benefit of this program. Now, any company can hire or sponsor you, but with smaller organizations, you'll likely have a direct relationship with your supervisor, which could increase your chances of sponsorship. Larger organizations often sponsor mid-level executives in specialized positions rather than entry-level college grads. However, there are no set rules and every situation is different. You can be the exception. Taking a further look at who hires international students, what we can see here in this darker purple, this reflects organizations with industries that will not hire international students. This lavender purple indicates organizations and industries that are willing to hire. And then this aqua color indicates organizations from industries that plan to hire international students. So if we take a quick look at this, we can see that the largest portion of employers in the healthcare industry, as well as the nonprofit and government industry, these are the industries that tend not to hire international candidates. But all isn't lost. I want you to pay careful attention to this. 14% of nonprofit and government employers are willing, 14% of employers plan to hire. So 28% of employers in the nonprofit government space plan to hire or are willing to hire. So that's 28%. Similarly, over here in healthcare, 14% of employers in the healthcare industry are willing to hire, and 11% certainly plan to hire. And I show you this not to discourage you, but to be transparent about the challenges that lie ahead. There are organizations that are hiring and sponsoring, and it becomes a matter of identifying those organizations. But what I don't want to leave out is look at this consulting over here. You can see that 26% of organizations within the consulting industry are willing to hire, and 37% of orgs in the consulting industry plan to hire. That's pretty considerable. That's a considerable amount of organizations willing to hire. So if you haven't previously considered consulting, this may influence you to do that. But again, what this shows here is what I've communicated in the past. Employers are primarily sponsoring and hiring international students from STEM designated fields, not so much from nonprofit, government, and healthcare. When we take a closer look at healthcare, typically these are doctors, nurses, med techs, and pharmacists. Does the Career Center have a list of OPT job titles? And the short answer to the question is no. In fact, limiting a job search based on any one particular job title may not be the most effective strategy. Remember that USCIS determines if a position is related to your academic studies, and therefore the academic applicability remains the crux for approval. So instead of focusing on job titles, what you really need to be focusing on is reviewing each position description thoroughly to ensure that the duties, the tasks, and the responsibilities relate to your academic training. Does the Career Center have a list of OPT sponsors? And the short answer to the question is, well, yes and no. I really want to point out the complex and fluid nature of this process. So hiring and sponsoring is a very delicate and sensitive issue for individuals and employers alike. So again, as I mentioned before, because an employer was willing at one particular time, doesn't mean that they will be in the future. And again, employers who aren't listed here, it doesn't mean that they won't in the future. So what you can see here is a list of organizations that we've engaged with over the last several months. Over in the WA required column, these are organizations that require work authorization. Here are organizations that are willing to hire OPT, CPT. And then over here on the far right, these are organizations where indicated that are willing to sponsor. So again, this is meant as a guide. This is a very fluid situation, and what is true today may not be true tomorrow, so do proceed with caution. Continuing the conversation about sponsorship and hiring, this is a list of organizations where international Heller students have gone immediately following graduation. So this is data from 2017 to 2020. Again, where international Heller students have gone immediately following graduation. It no longer means that they're there, but it means that they went there immediately following graduation. And so what's important to note here is that sponsorship type is unknown. And what I mean by that is we don't know if these students went into these positions via OPT, H-1B, green card, or maybe they had work authorization because someone is here on political asylum. We simply don't know individual cases. Similarly, when you graduate, we'll invite you to several surveys so that you can communicate to us where you're going after graduation, but you will notice that we never ask about a visa status. We won't ask that information. And therefore, with these outcomes of previous international Heller students, we can't tell you sponsorship type. So again, this is meant as a guide. What does the Career Center hear from employers? Employers frequently communicate to us that they remain far more inclined to hire and sponsor for mid-career and specialized positions only. So these are decisions that employers are making on their own. They are looking primarily for mid-career and specialized positions. Now, most organizations will not hire or sponsor an international candidate unless they cannot first find a skilled domestic candidate. And what this information tells us is that international applicants aren't out of the running, certainly, but it is that they must present especially compelling cases in their overall application. So that means a refined resume, a tailored cover letter, really nailing that interview and being able to communicate their value proposition, so specialized skill sets, concentrations, experiences, and that strategy of differentiation I've been mentioning in the past. And lastly, some employers value expertise of natives in their home countries. So maybe an organization wants someone in their home country because they speak the language, they're familiar with the customs, the cultures, the structures, the organizations, the government, the way that the country is organized and is run, is managed, is structured. So there are some employers that maybe can't hire you in the United States. They're not in a position to hire you in the United States, but perhaps in your home country, you can work for the same employer. What is the Career Center here from employers? So you may remember from the previous slide, I said that most employers are looking to hire mid-career and specialized candidates. However, there's an exception to everything, right? These 10 international organizations regularly look for early career professionals, so there's some good news here. Here's 10 organizations, and again, this is meant as a guide. As I've been abundantly clear about in the past, this is meant as a guide. What is true in this moment when this presentation was put together, it may not be true to tomorrow. So again, do proceed with caution. Do use this as a guide as you continue your search. How can the Career Center help me? In addition to the resources that have been outlined as part of this larger outreach initiative and those that I'll talk about at the end of the presentation, the Career Development Center continues to offer individualized appointments, career education, and opportunities for connection to employers and alumni alike. So an individual appointment is an appointment that you schedule and handshake, and it'll be a meeting between you and a career advisor. This is where we can address any of the needs or the questions, concerns that you might have. So maybe it's a resume review, a cover letter review, interview preparation. Maybe you really want to hone in on your networking strategy or your search strategy. Again, this individual advising appointment is tailored to assist you where you need assistance. Career education programs are generally in the form of workshops. So we have hour-long presentations on the resume, the cover letter, networking, informational interviews, preparing for actual job interviews. All of these exist and we're offering them all the time. They're ongoing. And finally, our opportunities for connection. These are information sessions, treks, career fairs, panels, and the like. Above all, we encourage you to have a conversation with us about your overall search strategy and discuss your individual plans, but we do kindly request that students remain open to considering all options. Moving on to timeline and specifications, it's important to note that this information again is included as a friendly reminder to you. This information comes directly from ISSO. Therefore, if you have any questions about the content or the information that is presented here, please do consult with your ISSO advisor. Now, as a friendly reminder, you may apply for OPT up to 90 days prior to program end date, but no later than 60 days after program end date. And generally, program end date means graduation date. When your OPT application is filed on time, you may remain in the US while your application is pending. It is in your best interest to actively seek employment during this time if you don't already have an employer or position lined up. So as a friendly reminder, OPT is temporary employment and it must be directly related to your academic program. Now, the unemployment rule is slightly different for non-STEM and STEM OPT. So for non-STEM, unemployment may not exceed 90 days. For STEM, combining your 1 year of OPT and up to 2 years of STEM OPT, you may not exceed 150 days of unemployment. Now let's take a look at what acceptable OPT may include. Now, you can work for multiple employers. For non-STEM OPT, you must work a minimum of 20 hours or more per week in total. So if you have an employer who can give you 15 hours of work per week, that's great. What now has to happen is finding an employer who can offer you at least an additional 5 hours per week so that you can make that 20-hour minimum. For STEM OPT, you must work a minimum of 20 hours per week per employer. So if you have multiple employers, that could add up to a lot of hours. Now, you may seek employment through an agency. This could be a hiring agency or temp agency that places an employee at an affiliated company. Okay. Short-term gigs. So if you think about the consulting graph that I showed you, maybe short-term consulting is something that you could consider. Self-employment. For those of you on non-STEM, self-employment is an option. Those of you who are on STEM, this is not an option. So self-employment is pretty broad, but as long as the student keeps careful documentation of their work-related activity and it is related to their major field of study, it can be counted as valid OPT. And yes, entrepreneurship is considered self-employment. Now, for those of you who are not on STEM OPT, you may volunteer and you may take an unpaid internship position. The opposite is true for STEM. STEM, you must be paid. So again, any questions as it relates to this information, please do direct those to ISSO. Moving into some sponsorship questions. The first question is a great question, is something that we often receive, and it is, should I list my visa status on my resume? And our general advice is rarely. Rarely should your visa status be included in your resume. Your resume is really a professional document that markets your professional self. So your education, your skills, your training, certifications, these types of pieces. Now, it's really important that you never lie about your visa status, of course. And in some instances, it may be in your interest not to draw attention to it. But ultimately, you may choose to list your status to indicate your legal authority to work in the United States. Ultimately, that is up to you to decide. What I will say is that there is no general consensus among career advisors and employers. So there are certainly advisors and employers who would strongly advise against including visa information in your resume. And just the opposite is true. There are plenty of employers and advisors who don't mind, who like that information up front in the resume. But for all intents and purposes here, it is our general advice not to include it in your resume. I think that there are opportunities to make more subtle references to visa status in your cover letter by saying something like, since becoming a naturalized citizen, I, so on and so forth, fill in the blank. So there may be more subtle ways to drop this visa status in a cover letter. I'm not convinced that the resume is the best place for it. But again, this is an individual case-by-case question. Secondly, what questions are illegal? So you cannot be asked in an interview about your visa type, nationality, place of birth, citizenship, or native language. Those types of questions are illegal. Now, you can, if we jump into this language piece here, you can be asked what languages do you speak, read, or write, provided that that language skill is directly related or required to the position that you're applying for. And certainly, you can expect to encounter these two questions. Number one, are you legally authorized to work in the United States? The short answer to the question is yes, you are legally authorized to work in the United States. As an international student on an F1 visa, you have work authorization through CPT and OPT, so yes. The second question is a bit trickier. In fact, I'm not a fan of the question because it's essentially two questions in one, and that complicates responding. And that question is, will you now or in the future require sponsorship? And generally, your response to this question is yes. So if you need sponsorship to continue working after your student visa work authorization expires, yes is the response to this question. There may be a couple of occasions where you respond no. So will you now require sponsorship? Of course not. You have OPT or CPT. You are authorized to work in the United States. But will you in the future? Well, no, if I intend to return to my home country after OPT. Secondly, do you now? Well, no, again, I have CPT, OPT, I'm authorized to work in the United States. Will you need it in the future? Well, no, I am pursuing an advanced degree after OPT. And if you remember, OPT sort of renews at each degree level. So you sort of get OPT once at bachelor level, once at master level, and again, once at the PhD level. Now, you might be wondering if answering yes to both of these questions could mean that an employer won't consider you for a position. That is a possibility. However, it's better for that to happen early in the application process rather than finding out when you have a job offer that the organization won't be able to hire you. Networking before and using resources like myvisajobs.com, which I'll talk about shortly, before applying to jobs can help you identify which employers are open to hiring international students. When in the hiring process, do I reveal that I'm an international student? This is a very sensitive question which needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. In fact, I'm not convinced that it's absolutely necessary. Your educational background and work history may display or communicate that you are an international student. So an employer might just pick up on it to make some assumptions, perhaps, based on location of training and experience. As we know, some employers adhere to strict policies against hiring international students. Others may prefer to hire US citizens, but again, some organizations can be convinced otherwise. It may be in your best interest to have this conversation before an employer has spent a significant amount of time and money trying to recruit you, in which case you might have the conversation during the first or second round interview, but certainly no later than the job offer if you feel that this conversation is necessary. If a company says they don't hire international students, should I even apply? So this is a great question, but again, it's a very sensitive question and it needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. What this may actually mean is that an employer hasn't hired an international student yet. And again, you could be the first. So in order to convince a prospective employer, it's your responsibility to educate them about the process of hiring an international student. Again, this is an opportunity to convince an employer otherwise. Now, do be mindful that they still may not hire you, and that can be a difficult realization or conversation to have, but do be mindful that that is a possibility. We recommend that you first target organizations with a history of hiring international candidates. We've shared a couple of lists with you in the past to serve as guides. And of course, I'll talk to you about myvisajobs.com, which is another resource that can help you identify these organizations. Now, here are our top 10 strategies to increase your likelihood of success. And right there in big bright red, tilted, you can see start your search early. And again, this is a conversation that I had early about the significance and the importance of starting your search early. Regardless of where you entered your program, you are in the search now. There are a lot of pieces that you can be concentrating on, like your documents, your resumes, your cover letters, and of course, starting to develop your network. Number one, networking is absolutely essential as we've outlined in this presentation. Networking, I find, is an opportunity, especially for international students, where I've seen international students have the most success, is what I should say, in that where you build meaningful relationships, this is an opportunity. This is when people are more likely to give you an ear, to understand your circumstances, to really see your value, your skill sets, your experiences, your value proposition, and either create an opportunity for you or connect you to someone who can create an opportunity or who might have an opportunity. So networking is absolutely essential in your search. Number two is maintaining flexibility. So it is no secret that we are in an economic recession, and what this means is that we need to be absolutely flexible with regard to our search. So even in a robust economy, it is still absolutely true in a recession economy that we no longer have the privilege to say that we only want to work in a particular industry, in a particular role, with a particular organization, in a particular city or state. The situation demands that we are much more flexible than that, right? So we have to be open to location. We have to be open to organization. We have to be open to role and industry in these pieces. Being flexible opens up more doors and opportunities. Number three, identify a strategy of differentiation. And this is something that I've been stressing throughout this presentation. And this is really about taking self-inventory. Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my skill sets? What do I have the capacity to do? What are my values? How do I communicate to an employer my value proposition and how I'm different from other candidates? Number four is persistence. Again, you're going to be told no. You have to persevere through that. Part of persistence is that resiliency, right? Building that physical and mental capacity to move forward despite obstacles. So you have to continue to move the ball forward even when you encounter no's or challenging situations. Number five, proactive approach. And this means that career development demands, it requires active participation. Opportunities aren't going to simply find their way to your inbox or to your laptop or to your mailbox. You must be an active participant in this process. Number six, share opportunities with your peers. If you come across an opportunity that isn't necessarily of interest to you, but you know someone who would be interested, by all means, share among one another, help each other out. Number seven, again, the situation that we find ourselves in requires creative thinking and thinking outside of the box. So what is traditional and typical may no longer work. So it's important to think about what you might do to put yourself out there that is creative, that is outside of the box, that could lead to an opportunity. Number eight, focus on what you can control. There is so much outside of our control these days that I like to encourage people to focus on what they can control, right? So we can't control a global pandemic. We can't control a recession, but what we can control is our attitudes. We can control our documents. We can really refine our resume, tailor our cover letters. We can control how much we do or we don't network. We can control how much we participate in appointments, in advising sessions, in networks, in connection opportunities through lunch and learns, information sessions, treks, these things. So there is so much that we can control that let's focus on those. We know that there are a lot of challenges and obstacles as it relates to OPT and limitations, but let's focus on what we can control. Number nine, make contingency plans. So it's really important in career that we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. It's important that we have plan A, plan B, and plan C because things may not go according to plan, and we want you to have contingency plans. And finally, here are some search resources and search sites. So My Visa Jobs. My Visa Jobs is a database of employers and their history of sponsorship. So what you can do is if there's a particular organization of interest to you, you can find that organization in this database and take a look at their sponsorship history. So more than just taking a look at their history, look at the types of positions that they're hiring or sponsoring. So if there is a nonprofit that is of interest to you, you see that they do have a history of sponsorship and hiring, take a look at the positions that they are sponsoring, because if they're sponsoring IT positions, this organization may not be hiring the types of positions that fit your academic studies. This here MVJ demo is an 8-minute video where I demonstrate how to use myvisajobs.com. USCIS, the H-1B Employer Hub, is the same information in My Visa Jobs. It's just arranged slightly differently. I can better navigate My Visa Jobs than USCIS. It's really personal preference. The same information is there. The navigation is different. And of course, networking with sensitivity. It's really important to be mindful as you're networking during these times to network with sensitivity. So when you connect with someone and you're asking them for an informational interview or other type of ask, it's really important to be mindful and do it in a sensitive way, given everything that is going on. So do use these resources as you continue your search, in addition to those that were outlined in this larger initiative. A number of resources were referenced there. And finally, over here on the right, you can see a number of search sites that you might find um, of assistance to you. Well, it appears we've reached the end of the presentation. I want to thank you for your time and attention as it relates to navigating the U.S. job search. This is a particularly sensitive and complex process, and we understand you may have questions. ISSO and the Heller Career Development Center are here to support you. But until then, please take great care.